colleagues and students today online. Welcome to the ISTAC Professorial Lecture number 32, organized by the International Institute of Islamic Thought and Civilization. And today we gather for a profound discussion on a topic that resonates deeply with the core of our academic and intellectual pursuits, bridging the revealed and acquired sciences in universities, past approaches, and future directions. And to commence this important event, it is my honor to invite Professor Abdulaziz Virgud, the Dean of ISTAC-IIUM, to deliver the welcoming speech. The floor is yours.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. Dear professors and doctors, dear brothers and sisters, all the participants here in the Zoom and also in ISTAC YouTube channel, welcome to our IWPL ISTAC-World Professorial Lecture number 32. Let me warmly welcome Professor Khairuddin Al-Junaid, our speaker today, and for the information of our participant and scholars and student today, Professor Khairuddin Al-Junaid will be joining the International Institute of Islamic Thought and Civilization the soonest, inshallah, as a professor in the institute here, specializing in the area of Islam in Southeast Asia. Professor Khairuddin Al-Junaid, in fact, is not strange to the Institute and to IIUM. And for your information, he presented before one of these ISTAC-World Professorial Lectures. Alhamdulillah, he is able to be with us here today also to present the second professorial lecture from his side in a topic mentioned by Dr. Nur Al-Ain already, bridging the revealed and acquired sciences in universities, past approaches, future directions. Before I hand over back to Dr. Ain to moderate, let me just remind myself and all the participants today that this series of ISTAC-World Professorial Lectures started 2 years ago, and it has gained momentum, and many scholars, officials, ambassadors, even a prime minister, the former prime minister of Japan, delivered one of the IWPL here. Several ambassadors from Europe and from other parts of the Muslim world presented this professorial lecture. It was meant to bring scholars to bridge the different expertise from the academia, philosophers, scholars, researchers, and also from the diplomatic corps like ambassadors, like ministers, and also from the society. So today we are having the number 32. And it's very rich of ideas, views, suggestions in various areas, covering a wide range of disciplines, including religion, including culture, including social change, including sustainable development, including environment, including civilizational dialogue, and also including technology, AI, science, values, and so on and so forth. So I would like to really express my gratitude to those who are always supportive of this ISTAC-World Professorial Lecture from day one, and they are still here with us today in different capacities. Usually, the lecture attracts participants from different parts of the world. They join us from Pakistan, from Nigeria, from Uganda, from Sri Lanka, from Indonesia, from Africa, from Canada, from Europe. I think Professor Jasser Auda also will be inshallah joining us, and all the participants. So brothers and sisters, It's a great honor today to have with us Professor Khairuddin Al-Junaid and all the participants. May God bless you all and reward you for this time. With this, I hand over to Dr. Ain to moderate this ISTAC-World Professorial Lecture number 32. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Our Honorable Dean. And before that, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to introduce our distinguished speaker for this evening, Professor Khairuddin Al-Junaid, and he is already appointed as the Professor of Islam in Southeast Asia in ISTAC IIUM and will be joining us soon. As we know, he is a world-renowned scholar and a prolific intellectual. A graduate of SOAS, University of London, he has held prestigious visiting full professorships at Georgetown University, Columbia University, the University of Brunei Darussalam, and University of Malaya. And notably in 2024 and 2025, he has been recognized as one of the 500 most influential Muslims in the world, a testament to his profound impact on contemporary Islamic thought and scholarship. And Professor Khairuddin specializes in intellectual history with a particular focus on the connections between Southeast Asia and global Islam. He is the author and the editor of 13 groundbreaking books published by prestigious presses, such as Oxford University Press, Cornell University Press, and Wiley Blackwell. His recent works include Shapers of Islam in Southeast Asia and Contemplating Sufism, Dialogue and Tradition Across Southeast Asia. And today, Professor Khairuddin will delve into the evolving dynamics of integrating revealed and acquired sciences within the framework of higher educations. And his insights will illuminate past approaches, highlight key milestones, and propose visionary directions for the future. And without further ado, please join me in welcoming Professor Khairuddin Al-Junaid to deliver his lecture.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikum salam.
Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. First and foremost, I would like to thank Professor Abdul Aziz Bargood for inviting me again for this series of lectures, world-renowned lectures. I do not see myself as world-renowned, but it is a very interesting platform because we are reaching out to a very, very wide audience. As mentioned just now, we have people from many parts of the world listening in, be it on YouTube or on Zoom. And I want to take this opportunity actually to underline the importance of not only the lecture, but also the institution. ISTAC plays a role as an oasis of ideas and scholars coming together and sharing not only their perspectives in regard to their own specialization, but also their hope for the ummah as a whole. So I want to begin with this because this is not only a lecture for us to deepen our knowledge of certain issues, but also a way for us to advance certain ideas that can be put into practice. Hence the title of today's lecture, or today's sharing session. I do not like to call it a lecture because in NUS, what we do now is actually to have what we call as collaborative seminars. So what I'm going to do, if it's okay for Professor Abdul Aziz and Nurul Ain, I'm going to present for only 15 minutes. And then we're going to have a short question and answers for about 5 minutes. And then I will proceed again until the end. So rather than we have the question and answers at the end, we'll have it as we go along. Yeah, so we'll make it more interactive. And, you know, as we all know, especially young people now, their attention span don't go beyond 15 to 20 minutes. So the title is Bridging the Sciences in Universities. And when I talk about the sciences, I will qualify what I mean by that. Are the acquired sciences or the reason-based sciences and the revealed sciences. Past legacies and future directions. Why I use these subtitles is because I'm going to look back into the past, where we have gone as a civilization. And this is in line actually with the book that I'm writing right now. And then look at the present moment where we are now, and then I will try to give some ideas about the future. And again, I will talk more about the condition that we are in right now in Southeast Asia, and how universities, especially IIUM, can play a big role in the making of a new kind of university that we envision all over the world. Now, I'm going to go on 4 steps, and then we're going to have some question and answers along the way. I'll begin with talking about knowledge and the sciences in Islam. How has knowledge and the sciences been, how it has been approached throughout history. And then I'm going to talk about the issue of worldly scholars and their institutional impact. So again, why I want to talk about this, because we always blame the West. We always blame westernization, secularization, modernization, all of the ideologies that we can think about in putting us in the state that we are in today. But I'm going to turn the mirror around to ourselves when I talk about this, that the civilization that we have had has always been plagued by scholars whose objectives are very worldly. In fact, we can use the word secular. They have been secular for many, many hundreds of years, even before the coming of the West. And that has impacted our institutions, and that has led to the problems of dichotomization, bifurcation, and also the separation of the sciences that we know in the past as integrated. Then I'm going to come to the present, talking about the typologies of universities that we have now. So I'm going to take a very broad view of the universities that we have all over the world, the 3 types of universities that are now found all over the world in light of modernity or post-modernity, as we call it. And then I'm going to talk about the bridging, how the bridging has happened actually when we look at IIUM, which was a model for the Muslim world, but IIUM itself, and here, as someone, inshallah, who will be joining IIUM, I'm going to be as frank and honest as possible. I have already shown the slides to the rector of IIUM to get a bit of his inputs, because I'm going to be a little bit critical of IIUM, and he said that, you know, he's okay with whatever that I'm going to say. So since he cannot make it today, I'm going to be a bit more critical so that we can have a more frank discussion on how we can turn IIUM into the model that it was in the past, right? So IIUM has always been seen as the model university in the Islamic world since I was a student, and how we can bring it then to that higher level that we hope for the university. So let's begin first with knowledge and the sciences in Islam. And I think many of us here would know a lot of things that I'm going to share. These are nothing new, but really to underline certain things in order to set the background for what we have to do in future. Now, if you look at Islamic history, and I'm going to begin with this man whom everybody knows because he translated the iconic book by Ibn Khaldun, Franz Rosenthal. He said in his book, Knowledge Triumphant, the concept of knowledge in medieval Islam, that if you look at ilm is actually one of the concepts that have dominated Islam. And this is where he goes a little bit too far. He says that ilm is even more important than tawheed, which is not true. But what he got right is that ilm is indeed a very powerful concept in the Islamic civilization, such that even Rasulullah SAW would stress al-ilm qabla amal, that you must have knowledge first before you do something, that Allah puts the people, وَالَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْعِلْمَ دَرَجَاتٍ, has dominated Islam and given Muslim civilization its distinctive shape and complexion. Now, what's interesting, according to him, is that even if you compare all civilizations, the great civilizations, the Indian civilizations, the Jewish civilizations, all civilizations that you can find all over the world, some scholars say that there are more than 50 major big civilizations all over the world. Amongst the 50, only 15 are to be considered as really universal civilizations. He said that Islam is one civilization amongst others, on top of others, that emphasize on the importance of knowledge. In fact, there is no other concept, according to him, that has been operative as a determinant of Muslim civilization in all aspects to the same extent as ilm. that ilm pervades, saturates the whole civilization. You cannot think of anything in Islam without going back to knowledge. So knowledge is premium for Muslims, that there is no such thing as a stupid Muslim if someone decides to actually accept Islam. The moment one accepts the religion called Islam, he or she has to have certain knowledge. He has to know how to use the compass, to know the Qibla, has to learn a little bit of Arabic in order for them to do the Shahada, and has to learn a lot of things. And this is an innate feature of Islam, and he captures it very, very well. Now, what's interesting is that in Islam, knowledge is not for knowledge's sake. That knowledge in Islam fulfills certain function, and that then shapes the institution. First is that knowledge is purposeful. There is a purpose, there is a hadaf, where it's leading to. What is the purpose of knowledge in Islam? To gain deep understandings of the metaphysical and the physical. So this is very, very important, that in Islam, unlike many civilizations, it is not a materialist religion or civilization. That the purpose of knowledge in Islam is not only to know what is happening in things that we can see, but also to discern what we cannot see. The tangible is as important as the intangible, and the metaphysical and physical realities in the road to achieve wisdom, hikmah, is the most important thing when you talk about knowledge in Islam. And more importantly, sa'adah, happiness in this world and the hereafter. And we know that in ISTAC, we have Madam Hidayah, who's doing her PhD under Professor Abdul Aziz on the concept of sa'adah in Islam. This is the most important thing in Islam when you talk about knowledge. The purpose of seeking knowledge is to be wise and to be happy. Now, this is the crisis of modern day, actually. People are not wise. They do things. Even wise people, even smart people are sometimes not wise. They do foolish things. And smart people are sometimes the saddest people, because the purpose of knowledge is wrong. Second, and that's why Imam Shafi'i say that laisal ilma ma hufidhal ilma ma nafa'. The true knowledge is that which benefits oneself or others, not information that is merely memorized. So memorization in the Islamic civilization is very, very fundamental and important, but memorization is not enough. That true knowledge is the knowledge that has a purpose to benefit oneself first, to understand the metaphysical and the physical, to attain hikmah and sa'adah, but more importantly, to also benefit all other people, including non-Muslims as well, to benefit the world. The second purpose of knowledge in Islam and the sciences is refinement, or in Malay we say memperhalusi, that you refine something. The word ihsan is very, very important here. And knowledge is something that leads, more importantly, to the advancement of akhlaq. That if someone has knowledge but poor akhlaq, then that person is not something that who can be considered as a knowledgeable person. But akhlaq is not only important. Knowledge leads to the refinement of the soul and the fortification of the heart. Soul, when I say the fortification of the soul, it is that the soul is able to withstand the challenges of life, and the heart is able to accept melodies, tragedies, and even goodness, that it will not be corrupted so easily by externalities and things that are unimportant in the refinement of character. And that's why Imam Malik always emphasized that you have to learn good manners, ta'allamil adab qabla an ta'allamal ilm, that you learn good manners first before you learn knowledge. Adab is most important before you actually learn something that is important to you. So the refinement part is the second thing. And that's why universities all over the world, seminaries, colleges, their main objective is to produce an insan that is good not only to himself, but to society, and an insan that is not only a good citizen, but a good person, who is strong and who is able to change the realities around them. Now, thirdly, which is very, very crucial throughout the Islamic civilization, is classification. That there is a certain prioritization of knowledge. That Muslims don't seek anything and everything. They try to understand realities as it is, but they know, they discern the types of knowledge and their hierarchies. They know which knowledge is more important than others, and more importantly, the strategic uses of knowledge and how knowledge can then shape the self and society. And that's why many Islamic scholars in the past, in fact, until now, talk about, and later I'm going to talk about Professor Jasir Auda's idea on this, classify knowledge, which knowledge is most important, and even in the institutional context, they give primacy to certain knowledge above others. And Professor Osman Bakar mentioned in his book, The Classification of Knowledge in Islam, according to the three classification, and he was talking about Al-Farabi, Ibn Sina, Shirazi, and also Al-Ghazali, the highest knowledge is the knowledge of God. It is for the sake of the knowledge of God that all forms of knowledge are sought. Moreover, knowledge of all things other than God must be conceptually or organically related to the knowledge of God. So very profound the way he puts it, that at the end of the day, when he talks about this Tawhidic paradigm, it is that all knowledge during the height of the Islamic civilization was understood to be knowledge that leads one to the discernment of God and to the realization that Tawhid, the unity of everything, is the most important thing in seeking knowledge. This idea, together with the view that all knowledge comes ultimately from the same source, constitute the idea of the unity of knowledge shared by the three authors. So all knowledge is seen as united, be it the knowledge of religion, be it the knowledge of science, as in pure science, or the knowledge of social science. They are all placed together in equal importance in terms of the seeking of it, but one type of knowledge, which is the knowledge of God or the Diniya knowledge, is seen as the higher form of knowledge in Islam. And that then structures the universities that we see throughout Islam. So I don't want to talk about these universities. I was thinking as I was preparing to talk a little bit about Zaituna, about Qarawiyyin, about all of these universities that have been built. But more importantly, it's important first to understand the philosophy behind these universities. That with this whole idea of what knowledge is, Muslims in the past became the champions of all forms of knowledge, be it the knowledge of the deen, but also the sciences. So we can read the book by Jim Khalali, where he talks about Arabic science, how Muslims were so predominant in scientific knowledge, not only because they wanted to understand the material realities. They studied science because they understood that science is a sign of Allah. That all sciences, be it physics, chemistry, autonomy, geology, and so forth, would lead them back to understanding Allah in the most highest and metaphysical sense. So that's the first thing. I want to clarify this first so that we can understand how Muslims in the past approach this knowledge before the coming of a widespread idea of what secularism is. So maybe I can stop now for a while and I can get some questions if there's any. If anybody wants to ask anything, let's give it 5 minutes. You can type your question or you can ask. It'd be nice if you can ask directly. Anybody has anything to say, to comment, to ask? Somebody saying something there? Yes.
Sir, no, I could listen most of the portions of your lecture, but I could not find, for example, when we are talking about knowledge triumphant of Rosenthal and others, they have not classified knowledge in the sense as has been classified by our classical scholars like Farabi, Ibn Sina, Ghazali, and Ibn Khaldun. So there is some impact of modernization in this classification which has been presented by Rosenthal. So I think that we have to go to the classical classification of knowledge, as has been mentioned by Professor Osman Bakr in his book, classification of knowledge. So there, little bit, I just wanted to have your opinion about that. So can we use Rosenthal's book as standard book to ascertain what is Islamic classification of knowledge?
Yes, Prof. I think as in all scholars, we take what is in a sense congruent with our idea of what is knowledge in the Islamic civilization. I've read Rosenthal's almost all of Rosenthal's stuff now, and I think when it comes to that particular quote, he got to the heart of it, and we take from him what is good. But more importantly, I think what I want to emphasize here, and this is where Rosenthal is very useful, is that knowledge underlines everything in Islam, right? And the civilization is saturated with knowledge. And what is, in a sense, deficient, at least in Rosenthal's idea of knowledge, is that he doesn't actually emphasize on the importance of Tawheed in the making of knowledge in the Islamic civilization. And I understandably so, because, you know, he's part of the Orientalist project is to do away with that part of Islam. To be fair to him, he does mention it in the book that Muslims are always concerned and always discussing the realities, the metaphysical realities of God. They talk about the attributes of God as part of the knowledge base that they have, but he wasn't concerned with that as much as he's concerned with trying to show how they use certain concepts actually to describe what knowledge is. So nur, and so forth and so forth. Yeah. Okay, bro. So
Prof, you have another question on the chat. Says, what is your view of your thought on Islamization of knowledge?
Okay, this is a very good question. The Islamization of knowledge answer, I will give it at the fourth part of my presentation. And this is the most important thing actually that I want to address today. Partly because in light of the article that I wrote that was published in Sajara, I think some people are a little bit unhappy with it, but I will clarify that later on, Anas. We're going to get to that. So stay there. So what I can just say very quickly that it is an idea that is pertinent and something that I'm going to write also in my book, but it is an idea that requires further refinement and development, right? So then the question by Fikri, to what extent did we need to connect all the human science to the science of God? In my concern, let's talk about the sovereignty state of Malaysia depending on the liberal order. Slide 2. In this sense, we're no longer connected to the sovereignty of Allah. Do we need to do mantik kalam to use this tool in our history? No, we don't need to use mantik or kalam to bring God back or divine back into the discussion. Even on the discussion of statehood, when we talk about having the divine in mind, we do not need to say that, you know, the theory of knowledge of politics that we have now has to include explicit references to Islamic texts. If you look at how Ibn Khaldun especially do it, Franz Rosenthal, when he translated the Muqaddimah, he showed how in many parts of the Muqaddimah, the lines that were given by Ibn Khaldun were actually taken from the Quran. And he put it as a footnote, that this is actually a verse of the Quran. He cited it, but he did not say explicitly this is Surah Anbiya, ayat number 7, or so forth and so forth. So what I'm saying here is that, and later I'm going to explain this, when we talk about bridging, we do not have to do it first cosmetically, number one. Second, you don't have to do it in an awkward manner that, oh, start with an ayat Quran and then explain that, oh, the state has to function in this way and this way. We don't have to do that, but we can do it in a manner that would show not only to ourselves, but also to the world, that the knowledge that we have of the Quran is equally universal. The problem that we have now, and later I'm going to talk about it, is that because of secularization, what we have done is actually sometimes to use Islamic sacred sources as something that is almost foreign to the kind of knowledge that we have now. So when you read a lot of these works that have been produced, the Quran is placed within the work in a way that is almost disjointed. And the theories that come out from many of these works end up becoming something that is not fully developed, because people do not understand how basically first to read the Quran vis-a-vis how, for example, to discuss statehood and so forth and so forth. So we don't need mantik and kalam. We need to first understand how revelation fits into the discussion of anything that is non-so-called revelation, that is acquired. Okay, but I will explain that as well. How you define knowledge? Knowledge is basically not information. Knowledge is something that comes into the heart and the soul, where the heart and the soul, and here I think this is where Professor Naqib Alatas is very important. The heart and the soul recognize meaning, right? And that meaning then, to go beyond Professor Alatas, leads to action. So it's not a philosophical thing, that the arrival of meaning to the soul and the soul to the meaning, but the bringing of that meaning into real change in oneself and in society. So that's how I would define knowledge. Okay, so 5 minutes up. Please save your questions. I'm going to go on here. Then that leads us to the worldly Muslim scholars and their institutional impact. We must know that in our civilization, while we understand knowledge in this very noble way, there have been for hundreds and hundreds over a millennium Muslim scholars who are sometimes also the traditional ulama that we know, that really, if you look at their objectives, they are not interested in the philosophy of knowledge that was there. And they are always called as the ulama ad-dunya. They love the world more than the hereafter. Hence, and this is the argument that I'm going to make today that have been made by some scholars as well, that they are secular in many ways. Secular in the meaning of they are interested only with the world and use sometimes religious knowledge in order to justify certain action. And the interesting part is that Imam Ghazali, if you read Ihya Ulumuddin, actually mentioned this in his first book, where he says about the scholars of the dunya, he says that what I mean by the learned man of the world or the scholars of falsehood is that his object of learning is to live in ease and comforts to get honor and prestige from the people. This is the predicament that he spoke about in the 11th century. It is a predicament that is plaguing the ummah in the most terrible sense today, because even if we say that we are in an Islamic environment and we have a lot of these worldly scholars whose objective is power, whose objective is materialism, whose objective is to achieve worldly pursuits, we have institutions that do not work. And this is why the Muslim world is in such a crisis institutionally, right? They, according to Imam Ghazali, are slaves to evil habits, the habits of wanting the dunya. The devil, he says, is powerful over the majority among them. And they are learned people, by the way, right? They know the Quran, they know the Sunnah, they know Islam, and so forth. And various kinds of sins misguide them. Almost every one of them. So again, Imam Shafi'i was very stinging when he talks about this. Every one of them, among them, is engrossed in the luxuries of this world and its comforts and enjoyment. So he's talking basically about the secularization of the Muslim mind before the coming of secularism. And this is the very powerful thing. When you read Ihya in another different way, you can see how forward-looking he was, right? And he says, for this reason, the majority of them consider good as bad, bad as good. And this is why they, I will talk about it in the later slide, they are not interested in scholars that are truly sincere in wanting good changes in universities and in institutions. The Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, had called them as the most wicked of the people. This is where he cited a hadith. I'm not a scholar of hadith. That is actually da'if, but whatever it is, he says that beware then of being deceived by the ambiguities, and this is very, very profound, of these teachers of falsehood. They teach false ideas, but they are very ambiguous about it. They portray it in such a way as if the ideas are very profound, their ideas are very Islamic. Their evil influence upon religion is greater than that of the Satan. They're worse than shaitan. Right? And this is interesting. You reflect on the Quran. Kamathali shaitani idh qala lil insani kfur falamma kafara qala inni bari'un minka inni akhafullaha rabbal alamin. Where you talk about the shaitan, where he whispers onto the people and then he runs away from the people, because through their aid does he arrive at removing religion from the hearts of men. So the last line is so powerful. They remove religion from the hearts of men, but they are Islamic scholars. So powerful, where he talks about the scholars of the dunya then and the scholars of the dunya now, right? So again, we need to qualify, or we need to think when secularism actually happened in the Muslim world. Or if not secularism, when secularization actually happened. Secularization actually happened even before the West actually came. And this is why later on, the Algerian scholar, Malik bin Nabi, said it very, very powerfully. We are colonized, according to him, because we are colonizable, right? I don't know how to pronounce it in French, but it sounds very, very beautiful. We cease to be colonized. Say again, Prof?
Colonializability.
Colonializability. So very powerful. He says that we have been colonized by ourselves. Before we blame other people, we have the scholars of the dunya. We have the secular scholars in our midst, and they've been there for over a millennium. We cease to be colonized when we cease to be colonizable. And this is very, very important for us to understand that the colonization, according to Malik bin Nabi, who also takes in that sense, in one way or another, from the scholars of the past, including Imam Ghazali, starts with knowledge, that they bifurcate knowledge to begin with. They see that they control the akhirah, the knowledge of the akhirah, and they suppress people who controls the knowledge of the dunya. And that led to the secularism that you see now. Now, what is their institutional impact then and now? But I'm going to talk about then first. First, they embed corruption, right? These scholars, not only are they corrupt, they justify corruption. So they cheat, they are unethical, they steal, they lie, and so forth and so forth. And that leads to corrupt institutions. So you have a culture of corruption being embedded in universities. But universities, these universities are madrasas, are Islamic universities. Second, they justify mediocrity. They don't like scholars who are prominent because of their knowledge, but rather they celebrate mediocrity amongst themselves. And this is the ways of the evil ulama. They prefer the ulama that are not profound, but are agreeing with each other. And they abuse the other ulama. Third, they politicize knowledge. So go back, this is where Rosenthal is powerful. He talks about how the idea of nur is so important as a mithal of knowledge, that these worldly ulama, they make knowledge as a source of politics, to gain power, to gain status, to gain position, to gain recognition, and so forth and so forth. And last but not least, they disempower recognized scholars. And Imam Ghazali himself was a victim of this. And he's not the only one. Of people who are disempowered because some scholars who love the dunya, who control institutions, are out to promote their worldly ends in order to justify the things that they do, right? So when the reforms that was provided with by Said Ahmad Khan, no matter how much wrong he had done, or how much we disagree with him, if there's one thing that Said Ahmad Khan did right, was to establish the Aligarh University. That was supposed to be the first experiment to resist not only Western colonialism, but to also, and people do not see this in the project of Said Ahmad Khan, to also resist the machinations of the worldly scholars, that he wanted to now integrate back worldly, acquired, and also reason-based sciences. It is an experiment that was noble to some extent, but was also in a sense affected by colonialism. Said Ahmad Khan himself also suffered from being an Anglophone, an Anglophile, that he loved the British so much that he didn't see that the British could do any wrong. But at least institutionally, he actually proposed an idea to revive the spirit of knowledge in Islam. But the tide of secularism is so powerful. So the Arab world was very much impacted by secularism. Turkey, Algeria, and other countries in North America especially went on a total secularization mode. Iraq with the Ba'ath Party and so forth, turned the whole terrain into a secular terrain. After secularism, now scholars are saying that we have entered into a post-secular world. So if you're interested in this, do read the book of Dustin Bard. He talks about how, yes, secularism has affected us, and it has affected us greatly. What is happening now is that the world is heading towards a new and a different direction, that religion is coming back, that people realize, whether Muslims or non-Muslims, that secularism has a lot of excesses, and that this removal of the divine from knowledge has resulted to so many problems of humanity, from the problems of environmental degradation to the loss of moral norms, to the rise of neoliberalism that has affected the economies of so many countries. All of this is bringing us back basically to the legacies that we have had before. So thank God for post-secularism, because people are moving out of this. And this is where Islamization then becomes very, very crucial. So this is the second part. And I want to again underscore this whole issue, that we do not need secularism to understand that our scholars have always sometimes been secular. And these worldly scholars have had an impact then during the time of Imam Ghazali and before, and had an impact throughout our history. And that's why the Muslim universities, the universities in the Islamic world now suffer from so many problems. That development becomes very problematic, not only because of political problem, but problem within the universities itself. Problem of worldly scholars who wear the garb of Islamicity, but at the end of the day led to more secularization of the university. Secularization in the sense that they are pursuing worldly ends, but then hiding it behind the language of Islam. Okay, so let's stop for a while, 5 minutes for any questions from anyone.
Assalamu alaikum, sir. Again, no, I have some observation. So far as Sir Said Ahmad Khan is concerned, he was criticized by Maulana Maududi in his talimat.
Yes.
And he showed in his talimat that Sir Said has just led people to astray in many ways. And then Maulana Maududi wanted to reform the educational system of Aligarh, and he presented his views in form of the book, but that was not accepted. And he says that mostly the people who are pass outs from the university, they are communists. They have left their religion behind. And the theology, because I have been a student of Aligarh Muslim University, and as Professor Imtiaz is as well. So we know that I was the top theology department. That was just a cosmetic, arrangement to teach Islamic studies. Otherwise, it was totally secular and westernized education that was being imported there. Later on, some things have taken place, but overall, that was not a very good example of revival of Islamic educational, past, in a sense, I should say. Thank you.
Yeah, there are problems. In fact, he's not the only one that experienced this kind of inability to overcome the allure of colonialism. There were many. I mean, I just gave him as one example in India. Even in Southeast Asia, some of the institutions that were found, in fact, even the Al-Imam movement suffered from people who are very Anglophone. So in as much as they want to reform Islam, sometimes they fell into the trappings of, at the end of the day, looking up to the West. And Said Ahmad Khan, there's so many biographies of him, had that problem. But what I'm trying to say is that it was a notable attempt at trying to change the tide. Whatever problems it had, whether it produced communists or so forth and so forth. I mean, even people who go to Azhar also become secular, and there's so many examples that I can give. Taha Hussein, the great Taha Hussein, had certain ideas that was considered by the ulama in Egypt as heretical. So my point here is that there was a moment in Islamic history, especially in the modern period, where scholars such as Said Ahmad Khan tried to kind of reform what was happening due to excessive secularization. But that reform couldn't achieve the targets that they wanted to, partly because of his own problem, his philosophy of knowledge. He didn't accept that Muslims should go back to that kind of spirit in the past. He wanted something that was hybrid. But it is something that for us, these are things that we should learn in order to move forward in future. All right, so there are questions here. Ahmad was asking, you mentioned the relationship between akhlaq and knowledge. Do you perceive the distinction between akhlaq and secular ethics? Now, what do we mean by secular ethics? This is another problem that we have as Muslims. That sometimes we think that secular ethics means ethics that are totally unethical. That's not true. and to be fair, I'm not defending secularism, and I do not promote secularism, that secular ethics, and you should read the book by Richard Sennett, an American philosopher, and he talked about the corrosion of character. He's totally secular. But in the book, he argues that one of the problems that we have in modern civilization, especially American civilization, is that there is a loss of character. Because we don't have akhlaq, the corrosion of character, we have come to a level in our history where we cannot respect each other. And that's why crimes are so abundant in America, that claims to be the highest form of civilization and the policeman of the world. So there's no distinction when we talk about the akhlaq between how secularists understand it and how we understand it, if the secular ethics understanding of akhlaq is incongruent with our tradition. Now, again, secular ethics have many schools of thought. There's the school of thought within the secular branch that is more amenable and more open to religious values. Richard Sennett is one of them. But there's another end of it that is totally anti Richard Dawkins and gang, that is anti-religion, and that is the thing that you cannot find any congruency with Islam. For them, like, even if you want to not wear your clothes or things like that, it's okay for them. So that distinction, we must understand which school of thought we are talking about. But by and large, actually now, a lot of these secular ethical philosophers are coming to the middle. And these more extremist secularists, they get a lot of sound bites because of media and so forth and so forth. They do not represent most of them. So I'm going to talk about how then can we start a conversation with some of these people. Now, well, sir, as a Native American, would prefer to live in a secular environment rather than the Catholic doctrine of being in charge of what it says is wrong. Well, I don't want to comment on the Catholic doctrine. I've lived in America before, in Washington, D.C. and in New York. There are pluses and minuses. It depends on what we are talking about. I'm not saying that we impose some kind of theocracy that was there during the Middle Ages. But what I'm saying is that secular, whether it's a secular environment or a religious environment, what we want basically is an environment that can accept all ways and systems of life, right? And this is where in discussions of secularism, there are what we call as mediated secularism, where there are secular countries or secular oriented countries that are more open to religions than others. And this is what we want to move towards, right? Certainly not the hardliner Catholicism or the hardliner Islam or so forth and so forth. So Salam, Prof, can you elaborate a bit on the idea of post-secular age in the literature? This is very, very big topic. I can give another lecture on this one. But the post-secular age basically leads back to all other thinkers, Peter Berger and so forth, even Jose Casanova, who talks about the return of religion. But more importantly, the idea of post-secular basically means that we are living in a condition where this whole idea of ignoring the importance of religion cannot be accepted anymore. That religion is now becoming more important. They have become very public. They have become very, very powerful. And religious institutions are now entrenching themselves, not only in religious communities, but also in what was seen in the past as secular arenas. So that's why you can see that in Turkey, for example, the rise of the Erdogan government, and even in America now, I mean, part of the reason why people are voting for Donald Trump has to do with some of the promises that he gave towards religious groups. So again, the post-secular age, basically an age that is moving beyond this excessive idea that the divine ought to be removed totally from the lives of human beings. But we can talk about it even more. Start basically with that book by Daniel Brill. I think that's a very good book to start with, to understand at least the concept. How would you relate the modern world to Islam? How would you call it secularization of Islam? How would you find solutions to modern day issues? This is very, very broad. Again, which modernity are we talking about? There's Western modernity that is pervaded by the West and was in the West, but there's also a modulated form of modernity that came into the Islamic world. So some parts of the Islamic world took on total secularization. Others take in a partial one. at least when you talk about Southeast Asia, yes, secularism came, but secularization in Southeast Asia wasn't complete. In fact, even the British actually emphasized the importance of religion in Southeast Asian societies. That's why until today, state control of religion is very, very strong, especially in Malaysia, because the secularization project after the coming of colonialism was not actually complete. It was powerful, but it did not pervade every aspect of life. And that's why Islam in Southeast Asia, in as much as it was impacted by secularism or secularization, it was not totally secularized. And that's why revivalism came. Part of the reasons why, and this is the argument that I made in my book, Islam in Malaysia, part of the reason why Islamic revivalism became very powerful, especially in the 60s, has to do with the fact that there were spaces and avenues for religious groups to still function, even if the state was secular. And because there were spaces, there were places, there were avenues, it was just a matter of time before these religious groups get to penetrate certain institutions and get to pervade their ideas. With the coming of the digital age, boom, religious resurgence came into the world. Okay, so there are a few more questions. Well, this is good, and I'm gonna answer that later on. Just take one more first. Short of being fully competent scholar, how can a student identify the works of a dunya motivated scholar? So how do you identify the works of a dunya motivated scholar? Well, we learn, at least as historians, before you read history, study the historian. This is the first rule of being a historian. You don't read his book first. You study his or her life or her vocation or that person itself. Of course, if there's nothing written on that person, you wouldn't know, but you will know in terms of the big ideas that they're arguing for. Now, it's tricky, especially when you read Islamic works, because totally it will sound very, very Islamic. They are talking about Islamic philosophy, Islamic politics, and so forth and so forth. Sometimes a scholar may be dunya, but his works do not actually reveal it, right? And this happens, and this is where Ibn Khaldun also becomes a good example for it. If you look at Ibn Khaldun's life, he was a highly political man, highly opportunistic, and very, very brutal actually towards his enemies for much of his life, until he fell from favor for so many times and then retired in Fez. That's when he looked back at his life. The Muqaddimah is actually a reflection of someone who fell from politics so many times and realized that he was a Malikic jurist who became a wali scholar, regretted it, and wrote the Muqaddimah, and then talked about basically part of his errors and mistakes. So to identify it, you have to read the person very carefully. Sometimes you cannot find it in their work, but you can find it in their life for sure, right? So there's certain indications that are there. Usually they love power, and that's the first indication, right? Once a scholar is always in pursuit of power, that gives you the telltale signs. Okay, I will answer the question by Afifa and others as I go along. Please keep the questions going. But now I'm going to go to the most important part of the whole thing, about the universities and in the Muslim world and the two sciences. Now, because of secularization and because we have moved towards a post-secular world, we have now three kinds of universities in the entire Muslim civilization. And I'm just giving a general typologies. Typologies are meant to be tentative. They are heuristics for us to think about. And please criticize this typology and try to refine it, because it will help me as well. There are three kinds of universities that you can see now. There's the seminary type, there's the segregated type, and there's the synthesis type. All types of universities have Islamic studies in it, for sure, right? But they are approached in different manner. Okay, so let's go through them one by one. The first is the seminary type. This is where if you look at Al-Azhar, or maybe Al-Azhar may not be the best example, Al-Qarawiyyin, Medina, and others, and of course the scholars that go to Yemen, in Morocco, that in the seminary type of universities, there is an immersion into specialization in one field usually. So like my daughter who went to the University of Jordan, she was specializing in Arabic linguistics, right? And then on the side, she specialized in Qira'ah of the Quran. right? So you immerse totally. Usually in one, if the person is better, is good, is brighter, they can do two. But usually it's under the feet of experts in the field. So it's a totalizing kind of experience that you learn something deeply. And students then become acquainted with generalities of revealed sciences. So they understand Islamic studies at the very core of it. Within 3 or 4 years, but I was told that it can stretch to 6 years, especially in the North African system, especially in Morocco. So I have friends who have studied there. It can take longer, actually, in the North African system because they emphasize really on the discipleship system, especially in Sufi-oriented universities. Now, the thing about the seminary type of universities is that they have limited exposure to other sciences, but are very strong in memorization and mastery of language and text. So this is the interesting time about seminaries, that when people enter into the seminaries, they understand revealed sciences. But and you can see it also in pesantrens and pondoks in Southeast Asia. And they memorize text after text after text. It's just powerful, right? And they have this strong grasp of language, especially the Arabic language. In India, they will be very strong in Urdu, even Urdu literature. I have a very good friend in Brunei, University of Brunei, Khalil Ahmad, who was a PhD graduate from IUM. His understanding of Urdu literature is just massive. But the only thing, and I have interviewed these people, is that they are not exposed to other sciences that are acquired-based, that are reason-based sciences. And there is no blame on this because their main objective is to make many of their students most acquainted with the knowledge of the deen. So that's one type, right? The second type is what we have called, and this is the most pervasive type in the Muslim world now, is the segregated type. And this is where revealed sciences is a separate faculty from an acquired sciences dominated university. So University of Malaya, where I was teaching before, they have what they call as the Faculty of Islamic Studies, API, Academy Pengajian Islam, which is a separate faculty. And the modules taught in that faculty can be taken from by people from other faculties, but the ideas do not pervade the entire university. The entire university takes on what we can call as a non-committal idea of knowledge. Non-committal means it's not secular, but it's not religious either, right? You cannot say it's neutral because the people teaching there are not neutral, but they are non-committal, right? Someone who's teaching history like myself, I was in the history department, you don't say that you are teaching revealed sciences. You are teaching history, but you're teaching Islamic history, right? So most students then usually obtain little or no exposure to revealed sciences unless they take the opportunity to do it. So if they're taking physics, they don't necessarily have to take a compulsory module from the Academy of Pengajian Islam. The same is it in Brunei. I was in the Islamic Study Center in Brunei. Some students will take courses from us. They may be from engineering and others, but most will not do it. And therefore, many of these segregated type have very small centers that are dedicated to revealed sciences. Now, revealed sciences faculty within this university usually become like a mini seminary as well. So students may be asked to memorize the Quran and the Hadith, but they have an interdisciplinary outlook. So they're very interesting. Because of the coming of the British, who set up all of these universities, because take note, the universities that we have now in Southeast Asia, in many parts of the Muslim world, are actually the result of also Western models, right? It's taken from the Western idea of the university, but it allows religion to have a place, because even in the West, they still have the faculty of divinity, but the faculty of divinity is separated from the faculty of science and others. That was not so in the Catholic past or in the Protestant past. But they are very disciplinary. They can allow people who are experts in science to also teach in their faculty. So if you look at the Academy Pengajian Islam in Malaysia, for example, they have people who are also experts in halal science teaching there. So though they are not too proficient in languages and memorization of text. When I say they are not too proficient, I'm saying about the students. The students learn Arabic, but they cannot develop the same proficiency as people who go to the seminary type. The reason has to do with the number of hours they spend, unless they are specializing in the Arabic language only. Then that's a totally different story. But if they are doing Sharia and others, the proficiency may not be as good. It's good, but it's not as good And the reason is because of the immersion that I was talking about just now. So that's the effect of the segregated type. So that's the second type. Now the third type, which is very, very, in a sense, they are the minority, is the synthesis type, right? Where revealed sciences are taught together with the acquired sciences in all faculties. So all faculties would have Quranic reading, for example, to be part and parcel of the curriculum of an engineer, or understanding Islamic history as part and parcel of the training of an architect, right? Or the understanding of Islamization of knowledge, and so forth and so forth. So for this kind of universities, cross-disciplinarity is achieved through dependent on the backgrounds of academics and leadership. So you can get people who are good in both, somewhat revealed or acquired, when the instructors are good. So you need powerful professors who are steeped in both knowledge fields, and delving deep into both sciences within 4 years is very, very difficult. So if you ask anyone who is in the synthesis type of universities, they find it very difficult to juggle. So I've interviewed in IUM professors from the Faculty of Law, Political Science, and other faculties as well, be it the sciences or the IRKHS. And many of them would duly admit that it is difficult for the students. Some are able to master both at the same time. Some are not able to master one at all, but many can master one and a little bit of the other. So delving deep into both sciences in 4 years is difficult, but is achievable with well-crafted curriculum and more suited for bright students. So many students struggle in this kind of universities because they have to do both. They have to do Arabic, and they have to do Quranic memorization, a little bit of understanding about Islam, but at the same time, they have to do their normal specialization. It can be very challenging, but it is a notable way of trying to get back to the kind of universities that we have before. And if you're interested to read about this more, you can read the book by Masuda Banu and Kiko Sakurai, talking about the role of the universities and a bit about the curriculum. And a friend of mine who is in the history department at IUM, he edited this book called Charting New Directions for Muslim Universities. They also discuss the problems faced by the synergistic type of universities. And we can go through. So there's these 3 models that we have in the Muslim world now. Now, the big question that we need to ask is, how do we then effectively bridge the 2 sciences, right? Ilmu Aqliyah and Ilmu Naqliyah, the reason-based sciences, and the revealed-based sciences in the 3 types of universities. Now, the seminary type, like I said just now, don't have enough acquired sciences. The segregated type break away that revealed sciences to another faculty, and the synthesis type have done it, but then they have other problems in regard to making students be effective in both areas at least. So I am now proposing that what we need is an epistemological and operational revolutions, right? It's such big sounding words. Actually, it sounds very simple. Basically, we need to change how we view knowledge, number 1, and how we put that knowledge to practice, to put it very, very simply, right? That fits back to that worldly scholars that I was talking about. How they view knowledge for the world, for materialist ends, for power, for position, for status, and others. How they operationalize knowledge used not only to show how smart they are, but knowledge also used to outdo their opponents. And we need to revolutionize this. Now, how do we revolutionize this is the question. I am trying to say here that we need to reinstate IIUM into becoming a global transformative force, an Islamic Ivy League, and a model integrated institution. So it is part, IIUM is part of the synergistic model. What IIUM should be, has been, and could be even more, is to become a global transformative force such that IIUM can then effect changes in the seminary type if they are acquainted with that model, and also change the segregated type at the same time. But you cannot change people's minds if you are not good enough. You cannot change other universities if other universities do not look up to you. And the reason why we are looking at the Princeton model, the Cambridge model, the Ivy League model is because these universities are seen as the stars and the limelight. So this is the point I'm trying to make here. Now, how to lead there? How then can we make IIUM the Ivy League and the model integrated institution? Now, what we have been served right now is all of these rankings. I have always been critical of many of these ranking business, be it Times, QS, or whatever. But if one wants to use this ranking, it is that this ranking should have been done by ourselves. That we must have had already by now the ranking of our own universities. Now, I was told there are some rankings that have been developed, but they are not known as much to the world. My point here is that as much as we criticize the West for dominating the rankings, if you look at many of the indices outside this overall ranking, they are ahead of us in many ways. And I want to talk about it as we move along. The only thing that they are not ahead of us is actually the study of revealed sciences. Now, how do we then enter into that field and try to make IUM the synergistic model as a model that they can look at? So if you look at, for example, the statistics, the global universities producing the most CEOs, it's the 5 universities, Stanford, Massachusetts, Princeton, Yale, and Pennsylvania. If you look at the list, we are not producing the CEOs. When we talk about CEOs, we're not only talking about CEOs in large, big companies, but CEOs in any company. So if IUM or USIM or any other integrated and synergistic university are not producing this kind of people, we need to then ask why. And how then can we reach there? Of course, it's not our penultimate and ultimate objective, but it is something that we can use in order to effect change in society. Now, people may tell me, oh, we just want to produce ustads. We're not interested in producing CEOs. I am telling you that even the phone that you're using right now is actually the brainchild of a CEO. And you are using a phone that a CEO imagines will be useful for the future and for humanity. We need to then think of how we can produce people who can enter into that field, because it is totally Islamic to produce CEOs that can then influence the market, that can then fund the universities. Okay, so before I go on, maybe I'll take the questions first. Okay, let me go through one by one again. Ifat, she says, how do you relate the modern world to Islam? Would you call it secularization? I think I've done that. Ifa, what is your opinion about people who commented that there are overlapping shared grounds between Islamic and secular grounds? Yeah, there's a lot of overlap. What is secular? Secular basically the concern with this world, with the divine left out, the disenchantment of the world, the desecularization of politics, and so forth and so forth. Minus those things, secular people are also interested in climate change. Well, we don't have a problem with climate change issues. We share same issues as them. Secular people are also concerned with professionalism. Secular people are also concerned with corruption. Secular people are also concerned with people who like to grab power. We can share. So there's a lot of divergence, but there's also a lot of overlap between us and them. Secular and secularism are two different things. Someone who's secular may not promote secularism. These are two different things, right? Someone who's secular in their outlook, they do not see as God as important, but they do not necessarily want everyone to agree with whatever that they are trying to say. They are secular just because they don't want religion to be predominant in society. But someone who promotes secularism is another totally different story. That there are people who want to impose a certain ideology onto the people and have no tolerance of religion altogether. So we need to see the difference between the two and not conflate them to such an extent that, oh, I cannot work with secular people because they totally don't share any interests or any concerns of mine. That is totally not true. And the reason is because I have lived in many secular countries. Sometimes, as mentioned by the questionnaire just now, secular people are actually much better sometimes than our own people. Much more friendlier, much more ethical. And that's why their universities are well endowed and clean and beautiful, and ours are not. I'm going to talk about that. Is it entitled or just a slip of tongue to say that Islam can be reformed? Did I say that? Okay, if I had said that, I don't remember that. We'll check the recording later on. No, Islam cannot be reformed. Islam is pure in itself. What needs to be reformed are Muslims and Muslim institutions and worldly scholars. Fukuyama today, in spite of being very liberal, is critical about the laws of morality. Exactly my point, right? And he wrote that in his book Identities, and of course the latest book where he criticized liberalism and the entrance of the post-secular future. But liberals as well are now caught on what is the way out. They don't know the way out. We offer them the way out and be confident about the way out that we can offer to them. Ibn Khaldun is a favorite of the West. Yeah, Aziz Al-Azmi made that argument that he was, in a sense, rehabilitated by Orientalists. But a lot of Muslim scholars have studied Ibn Khaldun before the Westerners studied them. They are a favorite, maybe he's a favorite, maybe because they want to make the argument that he's the first Muslim secular historian, which is wrong. He was not secular. The whole of Muqaddimah, as Rosenthal has shown, is saturated with Quran and Hadith. So they can be favorite of anything. They also like Ibn Sina a lot, and other scholars, and also Sufism. It depends on which West we are talking about. What are the social political consequences of adopting Islamic secularism in predominantly Muslim countries? There's no Islamic secularism, and the word doesn't actually fit together. There are different types of secular frameworks. Like I said just now, some secular countries, states, and institutions are more open to religion, to Islam, than others, and we need to see the differences between them. I think modern educational theories are based mostly on philosophies that hardly have any relation with religion, and we want to implant Islamic values there. I don't understand. There are many educational theories depending on who you look at, but there are a lot of many educational theories that take on Islamic ideas. I read a lot of psychology. There's this scholar called Harold Koenig, and he looks at how religion is so important in psychology. So I believe it is the same with education. I think we shouldn't generalize that all educational theories are purely irreligious, even though they don't explicitly talk about religion. They do consider it is very, very important as well. How is it possible that without bringing Islamic philosophy of education, which is most cases not in sight anywhere? No, I don't think that we cannot bring in Islamic philosophy of education. Now, again, I always tell people, the West wants to hear what we have to offer. We are not offering them something that is powerful enough. And this is my critique of our own kind. The West want to publish the works that I publish, I write on Islam. So why? I talk about the Islamic philosophy of, I use the maqasid in my book, Muslim Cosmopolitanism. And I say that the idea of Muslim cosmopolitanism is derived from the Quran, from Surah Al-Hujurat. Edinburgh University Press published it. So we have to understand that it is not for the lack of giving us the opportunity, it is the lack of trying. I think we need to write things that are powerful enough for them to listen to us more, and we need to brand ourselves better. It is a challenge for us. We are, of course, fighting within the whole hegemony of the US and Europe and the politics of knowledge therein. But I think the Muslims in the past also had the same challenges. When Greek philosophy was predominant, they came in, they wrote, they became masters of it. Some of them wrote against it, like Al-Ghazali. If we are profound, we will be promoted by them. Mostly modern Muslims or the modern era abhors philosophy, whatever the reason, depending on what philosophy we are talking about. The philosophy that leads to speculative theology is problematic, and I am against it myself. Ibn Khaldun is also against it, and many philosophers, Muslim philosophers. In such circumstances, we are able to provide alternatives. We can provide alternatives if we have enough depth. Okay, so I will stop here for the moment, and then I will finish a bit more, and then I will take all the points taken in by Professor Imtiaz and others right after we get into the next part. So I just want to end the last part of this sharing session or lecture with what we are supposed to do. And here, going back to my point just now, we need to start with IIUM. IIUM has to be the model that we must start first. Yes, Abdul Hamid, I'll take your question soon. So sorry, let me go on for a while. Now, what should IWM do, or universities of the synergistic kind actually do? Now, we need to first employ the best of the best. Employ, develop, retain, promote top-notch scholars, not anybody and everybody, who are well-versed in either of the two sciences, or if not, both. And that requires human resource refurbishment. I wanted to use the word overhaul. We need to change the people, because, and here I want to take from Jasir Auda, which is very, very powerful in his book, Reinventioning Islamic Scholarship, the Maqasid approach as the new approach, Maqasid methodology. He says that Islamic scholars, therefore, must include all seekers of knowledge, right? Not only people who are trained in seminaries, but those who may have been trained also in segregated universities, and those who are also trained in the synergistic universities, males and females from all disciplinary backgrounds and at various levels and capacities, who are seeking to make theoretical and practical. This is the point that I want to repeat. You know, it's not only theoretical, philosophical, no, but also practical contributions to any subject matter based on a dedication to the revelation. So they are, in a sense, moved by the revelation as the driver of their thoughts and approaches. So if we must employ people in our universities who understand, even if they may not be people who are ulama, but understand the tradition and where we are coming from. And again, getting the best of the best of the best is not something that is required from IIUM only, but now Malaysia is heading towards that direction. So I was in the best university in Malaysia, which is UM. The top 5 university wants to hire the best talents in Malaysia. And why not we hire the best of the best of the people who understand their disciplinary specialization, but also understand Islam well enough. Now, to get the best of the best, we need to look at also partly productivity, right? So if you look at statistics on productivity, the highest of the lot has always been Switzerland. Now, Switzerland is not a very big country, right? But they can produce a lot of scientific articles and a lot of powerful articles, followed by Denmark, Norway, Australia, and the tiny island I'm in, which is Singapore, and Sweden, and others and others. So if you look at all of the countries within the list of scientific articles per 1,000 population, almost all of them, except for Singapore, are Western countries. Now, what's happening in the Muslim countries? Yeah, we are publishing a lot, but we also have a lot of retraction. So go back to my point just now, earlier on, the worldly scholars, right? That, oh yes, we publish a lot, but we publish a lot with predator journals and presses. But more importantly, we are also champions in producing articles that in the end are found to be unethical in our universities, right? So top the list is Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, Russia, and China. They have the most retraction. Saudi Arabia has the highest in the world of papers that are retracted. Now, we have to question then, why is this happening? Why are universities doing this? And why are universities in Muslim countries, whether it's a synergistic type, whether it's a seminary type, or whether it is a segregated type, having this problem? Malaysia is there. Number 6 in the list after Egypt, right? Followed by Iran, and then followed by India. So we must employ the best. When we talk about the best, we must employ ethical people who are steeped in learning, who can then change the system to bring it to the idea of knowledge that we have had in the past, a knowledge that is purposeful, a knowledge that is that understands classification, and so forth and so forth, right? So that's the first. The second is judicious selection and training of local, international, Muslim and non-Muslim students. We must admit non-Muslims into our universities, not only the segregated type, but also the synergistic type. And the beautiful thing is that IIUM has already done so and should be doing it more aggressively, so that they learn also about our tradition and they can share their traditions to us as well. Now, we don't accept anybody and everybody, and this has always been my critique of universities in the Muslim civilizations. There must be a stringent acceptance based on intellectual aptitude, character, and awareness of global challenges. And all big universities are not doing this. If you come into the university not knowing of the problems of the day, there is no point for you to enter into the university, right? It's better for you to go elsewhere where you can find something better to do for yourself. But in big, or ambitious universities that want to become the drivers of the world, you must get people who at least have a slightest idea of what are the issues of humanity. If you look at Georgetown, and I was based in Georgetown before, the acceptance rates of the class of 2028, this is like 4 years from now, is 13.2%, right? So they have dropped the acceptance. They're accepting less and less people now, less and less students, because they want only quality students. Now, this brings about the issue of finance, right? If you have less students, you have less fees. How then can we solve the financial issue? I'm going to talk about it in the next slide. Now, but more importantly, when we talk about students, we must also train them in interdisciplinary courses. So again, the synergistic thing, but they must also still be rooted in their disciplinary specialization. Where I am teaching right now, the National University of Singapore, they have, in a sense, brought together the College of Humanities and Sciences. It's not a merger in that sense, but the bringing together of different sciences such that people can know different sciences, master one of them, but acquainted with another. So an architect can study philosophy, then can understand the concept of beauty and aesthetics and build something in a way that manifests the beauty of nature and so forth and so forth. Because Ibn Khaldun reminds us that one rarely finds a craftsman who, knowing his craft well, afterwards acquires good knowledge of another craft and masters both equally well. This extends even to scholars who has the habit, whose habit has to do with thinking. The scholar who has acquired the habit of one particular science and masters it completely will rarely achieve the same mastery of the habit of another science. And if he were to study another science, he would accept, under very rare circumstances, be deficient in it. And now modern educational psychologists have proven it. Whether you read the book of the guy who wrote Blank Slate, Finker, or whoever, you will find that specialization is something that requires a lot of time, and we need the students to specialize in one field but knows other field at the same time. So he has what Malays call ketokohan di dalam suatu bidang, and moving on to another. Okay, so we have that brother who raised his hand just now. Can I take your question now? Are you still there? He has left.
Yes, brother.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Prof.
We have a lot of questions, Prof. Khairuddin.
Yes, no worry.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, Prof. MashaAllah. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It was a very insightful and fruitful speech or lecture. Barakallahu feekum. I was just wanted to I have shared with my students last time while discussing with them. I said, indeed, we have 3 types of universities in the Muslim world. So now I remember when you said, when you mentioned the 3 types or 3 styles, I was telling them, what do you want from our students to be? Rabbaniyin, Rahbaniyin, or Irhabiyin? Rabbaniyin, of course, is mentioned in the Quran, وَلَكِنْ كُونُوا رَبَّانِيِّينَ, which means be learned man of religion who practice what they know and also preach to others. So these are the Rabbaniyin that we want to produce in our universities and centers of higher learning, what you call institution in the Muslim world. But unfortunately, there are universities and colleges who are producing Rahbaniyin, totally in dichotomy between Islamic studies and the world sciences. So they don't teach them any subject that are related to science, only focusing on Islamic studies. So when they go outside, they are totally blind. They have no idea about geography, biology, all sciences. And the other type is Irhabiyin. They teach them not to accommodate any differences. So they don't want any other religion to be even with them.
Yes.
So no acceptance of others. So this is too extreme, irhabiyin and rahbaniyin. So what we want is the rabbaniyin.
Yes.
So how to produce them? This a big challenge. Another issue, Prof, also you mentioned ethics. So the issue of ethics here is who defines, who determines, who determines, who decides what is ethical. It is a big issue nowadays in our universities, in our colleges, how to teach the students ethics. Who defines it? Because in certain part of the Islamic world, ethics means the customs or the traditions of the people. So it is so hard. Whereas in the Western, they are propagating LGBT, for instance, as something that is accepted or acceptable in the society. So the issue of ethics is too different nowadays. Who decides, who determines, and who defines what is ethics? Thank you, Prof. Assalamu alaikum.
Waalaikumsalam. Very excellent points, Prof. And maybe I can snitch that Rahbaniyin, Rabbaniyin, Irhabiyin is very powerful categorization. Now, about ethics, I think that is the big point there. Who defines ethics in universities? This is where the seminary type becomes very, very important for us, and what we can learn a lot from them. That at the end of the day, the rector of the university, right, the sheikh of the sheikh, is the one who determines basically what is the ethical code of the university, and he walks the talk, right? And that has always been so in Islamic history, that many of these institutions, they usually revolve around that few people up there who clearly lay out what the university stands for. And of course, we don't want it to be personality-centric, of course. It should be systemic. But at least there must be, the way I see it, a kind of department or a kind of setup within the university where this ethical code is actually laid out very, very clearly. Interestingly, NUS has it. It has a code of ethics, and I'm sure IUM has it as well. But that's usually for your job and as a student. But the code of ethics that you are referring to, Professor Abdul Hamid, is how every single person in the university should act in the university, in the classroom, but also out there when they go out of the university. That, I think, has not been emphasized enough because of secularization. So what we don't realize, and I think you got to the very heart of it, is very, very powerful, that we have been secularized, but we don't realize it. We don't want to talk about the ethics much. Have you ever heard any big professor talking about ethical codes of an Islamic university? No. The reason is simple. Either they don't believe in it in the first place, or they are the most unethical people, right? And we need to start talking about it. So this is one homework for me, and thank you for highlighting this. Imtiaz talk about Buddhist monks and nuns, that their seminaries also talk about the Dharma, irrespective of religion. In Southeast Asia, the Buddhist seminaries were very, very powerful in the past. But what has not been said is that the Buddhists also emphasize on the importance of the divine, right? And they are inclusive of other people, something that we can learn from, even though we come from a different religious worldview, that the Buddhists offer us certain ideas about running institutions that we can actually draw from in order to empower our own institutions. In Singapore, my family and other friends, they run this big organization, Muslim organization, I don't want to mention the name. Whenever they need money for activities, they would ask the Buddhist lodge for donations. And at one time, the Buddhist lodge sometimes would give as much as $3 million to support an Islamic institution, right? So again, there's a lot of fiqh issues here. I don't want to get into that argument, but one thing I want to emphasize here is that sometimes we can learn from many of these people on how they run their institutions, and the philosophy that sometimes are almost in line with us, although we derive it from the Quran and the Sunnah. So don't misunderstand me. I'm not trying to be Buddhist here. I know a little bit about Buddhism. There are a lot of things that they are thinking and doing that we can actually draw from for our university. So as an IUM alumni working on IOK, my humble suggestion is that IUM should be international, totally. That's why it's called International Islamic University of Malaysia, an Islamic university based in Malaysia that must have international student and staff. Its ranking was 150 to 500 10 years ago. Now it's 650. Yes, we need to bring up the ranking, but I'm not that concerned about the ranking than about other things, right? More about how the university employ the best of the best. But later on, I'm going to talk about infrastructures and others, and I don't think people would have any disagreements with this, with me on this. How do you see academic politics in which somehow it's very unethical? Yes, all sorts of politics are sometimes unethical, and academic politics can be the worst. But what people are should not be what we are. They are not our teachers. If they are unethical, they don't have integrity, they steal students' works, they plagiarize, they start talking in public that, certain ideas that are not based on their specialization. How do you situate yourself inside your environment? Let me tell you that people even steal money from the mosque, and they are Muslims, right? So it's not your environment sometimes that affect what you are. It is what you are. And this is why I teach my children as well and my students, right? You can be in a third-rate university as much as you are in a third-rate soccer club. But if you're good enough, another soccer club will see you, and you go into a first-rate soccer club. So IUM is not a third-rate university. It's a good university. There are academic politics for sure, but don't be political. Be ethical, be a good scholar. And that's always my approach. Whatever people want to do, that's up to them. I am clear of my identity as a scholar. I want to publish, I want to write and publish in global and also local and regional outlets. I do my job and I let Allah decide everything else. What do you think is the role and contribution of AI in your idea of excellent university? Totally. We have no way. There is no way we can deny AI now. I do not use AI as much yet, but it has a big role to play. But as in all tools, do not make the tool the end in itself. It is a tool for you to understand or derive certain information, but do not be an AI-oriented, centered scholar. That means AI basically write your books for you, and now there are scholars doing it. That's why there's so many distractions, and we shouldn't hit that. So let me continue, and then we'll have the questions towards the end. How many minutes do we have? I don't even look at the time. We already 1.5 hours.
Yeah, it's now 4:30.
So we have what, 10 minutes?
Yeah, that's good. All right.
Okay, let's give another 10 minutes. If you have any more questions, please roll them in. So the other thing is that we need to understand that our universities need to be beautiful. Most of the Islamic universities all over the world are built in a beautiful way. IUM was a very beautiful campus when I was a student, but I do not want to comment about the state right now. Inna Allah Jamil, Yuhibbu Jamal. That Allah loves beauty. Allah is beautiful and loves beauty. And we need to have the best infrastructures and resources to build a vibrant research culture. One professor, and I was talking about this in UM, said to me, "Oh, my office, the university need not be beautiful for me to have good ideas." I asked that lady this question: "Do you want your house to look like your university?" She said no. Right. So what we need right now, if we are serious about turning IUM into this world recognized international university where people come and people are in awe of what we are doing, is to have systemic reforms, starting from the most basic amenities. So if you look at the 25 most beautiful campuses all over the world, none of them are actually from the Muslim world, right? It's very sad, right? Because these campuses used to be beautiful. When they say beautiful campuses, they are not only beautiful in the past, but beautiful right now. Clean water, clean toilets, clean classrooms, state-of-the-art infrastructures. That is the top university. And not only that, good libraries. So I don't want to comment about which library is not good enough, but I want to tell you which library is the best in the world. So if you want libraries where you can get powerful resources and good management, where the staff, you come in, and that's why I went to the School of Oriental and African Studies. You come into the library, you tell the librarian, "I'm working on Islam in Southeast Asia, I'm working on this topic." They will say, "Please meet the specialist librarian," and this librarian will show you all the resources that you have. You can finish your PhD in record time. And that is a good university, right? So Sheffield, it's not even high in the ranking, but they have the best library resources in the world, the management of the library. University of Carolina, Washington, and so forth and so forth. And we need to be serious about this. And of course, all of this will not be possible without funding from corporate donors and the government. And this is why we need to have endowed chairs, study scholarships, and research grants, because in the work by George McDessie, he said it very, very cogently. It is stated that Muslim institutionalized education was religious. That's the most important thing. It was religious. Privately organized, they were private, a company like IUM, and open to all Muslims who sought it, everybody. It was based on Waqaf. So the Turkish brothers and sisters, they are doing this very, very well. They have set up Waqaf universities, and we need to establish Waqaf Ilm in our university, and maybe ISTAC can start it. You know, we start our own Waqaf and have a charitable trust in order to run the chairs and so forth and so forth. The state or governing powers had no control over the institution, where we cannot do that because the state has some say in our institutions, but we can ask for a certain kind of autonomy. But instead, the content of education and its methods were left to the teaching profession itself, because the founder was usually a layman, just one person who has a lot of money and say, I want to set up a university, and that was Harvard and Princeton and others, and by the wishes of a professor for whom he instituted the foundation. So they set up all these chairs, all these universities, fund all these colleges because they know the professor. So again, go back to my earlier point. You cannot get money from anywhere else in the world, from any cooperation, from any rich people, if we do not have scholars who are globally recognized. So if we want to make the argument that we do not need to be globally recognized in order for our universities to flourish, we are going against our own tradition. Ghazali became known as the Hujjatul Islam because he was such a profound scholar who was patronized by Nizam al-Muluk. Because he was the best of the best, he was employed in the Nizamiya Madrasa. So we need to go back to that tradition again. So I'm just going to end here. And I just want to say again that what we need right now is to bring IIUM into that philosophy of knowledge that we had before. It is already there. It just needs to be enhanced. But in order for us to reach to the level where we can be the top of the top in the world in purveying the synergistic form of knowledge, we need to change a lot of the foundations. And to do that, it's not for the lack of trying, but it has to do with the will, the irada to achieve it. And I believe we can do it. So let's take more questions. They are rolling in now. I'm also an alumni, completed combination of IRK and psychology in Islamic psychology. It's difficult to function in a radio platform that embraces both RK and psychology. I totally agree with you. In a secular framework, it is difficult to fight the existing framework, even at having psychology arts to recognize Islamic psychology as a subfield of psychology in Malaysia, to practice like other subfield psychology like clinical psychology, IO psychology, and education. Most universities function within a circular framework. Like I said just now, most of them function within a segregated framework. So if you are a graduate from IUM, they will say that you do not know psychology deep enough, right? And that your idea of psychology is really very diluted, if I am correct, Afifa. Now, how do you position yourself? Well, I think for the current moment, at least, since you are already a graduate, you might pursue a postgraduate diploma or postgraduate degree in their institution. And then when you become a practitioner, you can then infuse what you have learned from IUM, merge with what you are learning or have learned from another institution in your practice. But for now, what we need to do in IUM is to enhance the psychological department in such a way that maybe we don't need 4 years, maybe we need 5 years in order for us to develop a full-blown psychologically, a full-blown trained psychologist, and then add the Islamic dimension to it in another year or throughout those 5 years. All these changes are not something that I want to get into the details, but what I'm saying is that you got into the issue that I was trying to highlight. That the reason why it's hard to function is not only because they are secular. The reason why it's hard to function is because the experience that you have had is seen by them as insufficient, and their concern can also be understood. The reason is because in fields like psychology, you need a certain base of knowledge in order for you to function. The same is with economics and others. If you don't have that base, it's hard for employers to accept you within that within that framework. Now, taking a master's, of course, is costly and time consuming. It will help you to get a foot into it. Any other questions from anybody else? Nobody who's asking? Yeah. Professor Faruqi used to tell us, this is from Professor Imtiaz, if you're not well trained, you will be shot down by other scholars. Yeah, totally. I think that this is why we must respect these people who are in the seminary type, because they are very concerned about this. In seminaries, if you don't know and you go out to teach, you will be treated badly by people who are steeped in the learning of the revealed sciences. So being very, very well trained is something that is very crucial. Right. Okay, Dr. Norain, I think maybe there's people have asked quite a lot of questions. Do we want to take any more, or I leave it to you?
Dr. Prof, maybe I can add one more question.
Yes.
Your presentation is very inspiring. I always, benefit from that. I think one of the things that comes to my mind, because I was trained in madrasah before, and I'm very familiar with all these traditional, kitab and so on. But later on, I come to university, and when I was there, I was reading Al-Ghazali, let's say Ihya Ulumuddin, and I can feel that whenever you get into Ihya Ulumuddin, for example, is a very traditional text. Al-Ghazali managed to infuse all these three disciplines together, like theology, fiqh, and tasawwuf in one kitab. And then, when you read it, you feel that there is a seamless kind of interaction between these three disciplines together. And when you go to Pondok, let's say in Kelantan, there is a Pondok Pasir Tumbuh. They all taught this thing also, but of course minus the academic subjects, right? As you said. But what I'm trying to say here is that there is a kind of seamless interaction and integration of knowledge is taking place there. The point here is there is no hostility between these three disciplines. This is what reminds me of what Prof. Osman always mentioned about the unity of knowledge and also the hierarchy of knowledge that he repeatedly I think the mindset of the previous scholars is that every scholars actually have the opportunity to learn these three disciplines, this takhassus, and there is no hostility between them. Meaning that if I want to talk about they call it ilmul kalam, I can, and at the same time I also can talk about fiqh. I also can talk about tasawwuf. But when we comes today into today's world, there is so much. I don't know if the term is correct. Territorializing knowledge, meaning that knowledge having a certain territory, and you cannot enter into other people's territory unless if you're gonna be shot down by people who say that, hey, you're not coming from this takhasus, you cannot talk about this. And people become so hostile when other people try to talk about their discipline that they are specializing in, whereas before there is no such kind of problem. And I think there is a scholar who wrote this barbarism of specialization. I think this Jose something like Prime Minister was always talk about this, the masses of the revolution of the masses. It was talking about people become so specialized and they don't know, they don't learn from each other. What is your comment on this thing? Thank you.
Okay, firstly, I want to talk about Ghazali. Now, the book is not only about fiqh, tasawwuf, and what was the last one that you mentioned? Fiqh, tasawwuf,
and aqidah.
And aqidah. No, it's also philosophy and science. If you read all of the Ihya, there's so many analogies from science that he used. Not only in Ihya. Why did he use the title Kimia as-Sa'ada? He was using the word chemistry, basically, kimia, right? To show that his work is not purely tasawwuf or fiqh or aqidah. It has science in it, as in what we understand today as pure science. So that's why a lot of references also to how fire lights up. He gives analogies of the mirror and so forth and so forth. So Ghazali is interesting because he is an embodiment of someone who do not let the walls that have been created by scholars affect his production of knowledge. And the reason why he does that is because he was disenchanted with all of them. Right? He was disenchanted with the faqih. He was disenchanted then with the philosophers. Although he delved deeply into it, Maqasid when he wrote the Maqasid, it was really him trying to delve deeply into it. But he was also, if you read carefully, the Ihya, disenchanted also with the Sufis, right? And the book is a person who's trying to transcend what we call now as cross-disciplinarity, right? People who wants to cross beyond disciplines. So that's him. Now then us, right? From his time to our time, it's a good 1,000 plus years, right? And knowledge has grown so wide and so deep, okay? Now, when you talk to medical doctors, they're not talking about specialization anymore, at least in Singapore. They are talking about sub-specialization, right? The specialization within a specialization. And the reason is because things are getting more and more complex, the complexity of medicine, such that you have to go super deep in order to understand something. But that only applies to diagnostic issues affecting health. There's another book by Epstein, and the title of the book is Range. And he argues that the complexities of the world now not only requires us to be sub-specialized, to know very deep, but we also need to be wide, right? To know a lot of things in order to dissect things properly. It becomes a sticky point, as you mentioned just now, when we, who are not seminary trained, then suddenly talk about religion. Now, in my own experience, that applies only to some circles, not all, right? There are some people who are religiously trained who do not like to hear people who are not seminary trained talk about the religion, right? But because of, like as the lady mentioned just now, AI and so forth, I think people are getting more and more open, slowly but surely, to the idea that we all can engage in a conversation about a certain issue, even though we are not deeply trained in it. I'm against this whole idea of people talking about a field that is foreign to him or her, that the person has no knowledge altogether. Then it becomes a big problem, right? Then you are talking to the ignorant who's trying to talk about religion, for example, or the ignorant one who's talking about medicine. I mean, I give myself an example. I'm not an expert in medicine at all. I'm not trained in medicine. But whenever I talk to people who are in the medical field, and because I like to read a lot about medicine, especially on psychiatric medicine, I talk about what they are specialized in. And they can enter into the conversation with me saying, okay, what you are thinking may be correct. And I'm looking at it from the historical angle. They're looking at it from the practice angle. We can enter into that conversation. To have that conversation requires people from different fields to have an open heart. And this can only happen when they are not worldly. The problem comes when they are very worldly. People are guarding and protecting their turf because they feel that if you enter into it, you are basically stealing their market. And it's interesting. I got this before when I was giving lectures in mosque before. And I had a remark by some people from the religious side, oh, you are stealing the market. They use that word. You're taking away our market. So it's a worldly concern. And once we can get over that worldly concern and know that knowledge, the essence of knowledge is more than to gain worldly recognition, then we'll be open to all people from different specializations to understand a problem, right? So that's how I began with that one, the problem of the worldly scholars who do not understand the real purpose of knowledge, but they are teaching in universities, and then they come out and say that if you're not trained in fiqh, you cannot comment anything because you're entering into my turf. There's no turf. There's just a problem that we need to resolve, and we can take different people from different fields to resolve those problems. Any more questions from the chat? Can we have very good point. Okay.
Thank you, Prof.
Yeah, that's all. Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah, I think we can conclude, Prof.
Okay.
Inshallah, we'll have you more here in ISTAC, inshallah. And thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. As we conclude this enlightening session, let us reflect on the invaluable insights shared by Professor Khairuddin Al-Junaid. One of the most significant points that he raised is the necessity of developing our own rubric to assess and guide our universities. And this framework should be deeply rooted in our values and our traditions and intellectual heritage, enabling us to transcend reliance on Western paradigms and create a uniquely integrated and balanced approach to education and scholarship. And in this endeavor, International Islamic University Malaysia has the potential to be a true pioneer as a leading institution that bridges revealed knowledge and acquired sciences. IIUM is uniquely positioned to spearhead the development of this rubric, and with its commitment to holistic education guided by Islamic principles and universal values, IIUM can lead the way in shaping an academic ecosystem that not only reflects our intellectual heritage, but also address the challenges of the contemporary world. And this pioneering role demands a collective effort from us all. On behalf of the ISTAC IIUM, we express our deepest gratitude to Professor Khairuddin Al-Junaid for his thought-provoking lecture, and to all of you for your engagement today. And let us carry forward the inspiration from this session and work tirelessly to shape an educational framework that truly reflects our own aspirations and vision. Thank you very much. May Allah guide us all in our efforts. Thank you very much, Professor Khairuddin Al-Junaid, and see you in Malaysia, inshallah, soon, very soon.
Inshallah.
Yeah, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Okay, Prof. Thank you very much, Professor Khairuddin. See you again, inshallah.
See you again, inshallah. Assalamualaikum.
Okay, okay, salam.